What if, somewhere in a remote corner of the world, there existed a place so strange that every attempt to explain it only deepened the mystery? Imagine lowering a camera into a dark, isolated shaft hidden far from civilization, expecting a simple answer, only to uncover images so unsettling that they raise more questions than they solve. Stories surrounding this location have fueled decades of speculation, despite official efforts to dismiss them as nothing more than folklore. Yet strange reports, mysterious radio calls, and the disappearance of a well-known expedition continue to keep the legend alive. Could there be something hidden beneath the surface that we still don't understand? Because if the accounts are true, what lies inside the Mel's Hole is genuinely disturbing. The story of the Mel's Hole first entered the public spotlight on February 21st, 1997. That night, listeners tuned in to Coast AM, the popular late-night radio show hosted by Art Bell. Known for exploring paranormal phenomena and unexplained mysteries, the program received a phone call that would soon become one of its most famous moments. The caller introduced himself as Mel Waters. At the time, no one could have predicted that his account would evolve into one of the most debated mysteries ever discussed on the show. According to Mel, he owned property in Kittitas County, where he had discovered something deeply unusual. At first, the object of his curiosity seemed unremarkable: a circular hole in the ground measuring roughly 9 feet across. It looked like nothing more than a natural feature of the landscape. Most people would have walked past it without giving it a second thought. Yet the longer Mel observed it, the more convinced he became that something about it was profoundly wrong. The first clue was the behavior of animals. According to Mel, creatures of every kind avoided the area entirely. Dogs refused to go near it. Wildlife kept its distance. Even birds appeared unwilling to land close to the opening. It was as though the hole emitted some invisible warning that animals could sense, but humans could not. Even more unsettling was what happened when Mel peered into the darkness. No matter how hard he looked, he could not see the bottom. Fascinated by the mystery, he decided to investigate for himself. What he discovered only deepened the puzzle. Determined to measure the depth, Mel attached a weight to a fishing line and began lowering it into the hole. During his radio interview, he claimed that he had fed nearly 15 miles of line into the opening, approximately 24 kilometers, without ever reaching the bottom. The result seemed impossible. 24 kilometers is an extraordinary depth, far beyond anything one would expect from a natural hole in the ground. Yet according to Mel, the line simply kept descending into darkness. The experience left him wondering whether the shaft had any end at all. To test the mystery further, he began dropping various objects into the hole. The idea was simple. Eventually, he should hear them strike the bottom. But according to his account, that sound never came. Whether he tossed in rocks, discarded appliances, or other heavy objects, there was never any audible impact. The implications were difficult to comprehend. How could a seemingly ordinary opening in the earth appear to have no bottom? Mel struggled to find a rational explanation. From his perspective, every experiment pointed toward the same impossible conclusion. The depth of the hole seemed to defy everything we know about the physical world. And that raises an important question. If such a hole really existed, how could it be deeper than any excavation ever created by humanity? After all, the deepest artificial hole on Earth is the famous Kola super deep borehole. Yet according to the legend, the Mel's Hole appeared to extend even farther into the unknown. At nearly 12 kilometers deep, deeper than the Mariana Trench, Kola required the use of industrial drills at the limit of their capabilities. And do you know why they stopped? The temperature. At about 12 kilometers, the heat was so intense that the rocks turned plastic, closing the hole as soon as the drills stopped. The Mel's Hole was at least twice that deep, and that alone made it impossible to exist. At that depth, the walls should collapse. The rocks should give way and close the hole. But none of that happened. And because Mel used fishing line, which returned intact, not burned or damaged, it was clear that the temperature inside the hole wasn't nearly as extreme as it should have been. Scientists denied that such a hole could exist. It defied all logic, all the laws of physics and geology. Yet there it was, the Mel's Hole, defying explanation. However, depth was only one of the factors that made this hole so unusual. Sure, it appeared to have no bottom, but what about the other absurdly strange things Mel documented? The black light? Mel described the hole in more detail in other episodes of the same show, in 2000 and 2002. And one of the most intriguing descriptions was something the hole periodically emitted. It was a light, but at the same time, it wasn't light. Mel described it this way. Imagine how a flashlight emits light in a beam. Mel's hole did the same thing, only in reverse. Instead of light, it emitted a beam of darkness. And not just any darkness. One of Mel's neighbors saw it and described it as the blackest of blacks. A solid beam of darkness. It seemed like an omen, and once again, it defied logic. Darkness is simply the absence of light. It's not something that can travel in beams. But somehow, the hole emanated this as if it were something physical. Nothing made sense. And if it were just Mel saying all this, maybe he'd be dismissed as a lunatic. But even neighbors reported seeing the same things, making it hard to ignore the reality. And then came the radio anomalies. After realizing the hole's anomalous properties, Mel began visiting it more frequently to conduct experiments. To pass the time, he carried a radio, but even that was affected by the hole's influence. One time, while listening to his favorite music station, the radio began to emit strange voices, people talking, but without being able to understand what they were saying. Things got even more bizarre when the radio started playing songs from another era. Old songs no station had played in a long time. It was as if the radio was picking up signals not from another place, but from another time. He even broadcast programs that hadn't aired in decades. All of this was terrifying. But by this point, Mel had witnessed even stranger things. He wasn't there just out of curiosity. He was conducting experiments, with results that defied all logic. According to Mel, reality was distorting around the hole, causing inexplicable phenomena. For example, Mel saw certain metals change shape, or transform into others when brought closer to the edge of the hole. This effect was most pronounced at the entrance. Other substances also appeared to change. And to test this theory, Mel conducted an experiment. Curious and creative. He filled a bucket with ice, tied a rope to it, and lowered it into the hole. When he pulled it back up, the ice hadn't melted. However, there was a strange quality. The ice, without turning into water or steam, was hot. Hot enough to burn to the touch, yet it retained its shape. It seemed it wasn't just the hole that defied explanation. Anything that entered it also began to act abnormally. This theory was further confirmed by another incident. Mel and a neighbor used the hole to dispose of trash. Since it appeared to have no bottom, it seemed useful. When one of the neighbor's dogs died, he dumped the body in the hole. Bad idea. If inanimate objects were already behaving so strangely, imagine what could happen to organic material, especially a body. Shortly afterward, Mel and her neighbor began seeing something unusual. They spotted the same dog, wearing the same collar, wandering through the nearby woods, healthy and alive. No one dared approach, but they could have sworn it was the same dog. Only something was different. The dog didn't recognize its owner. Even when called, it wouldn't respond or come near. It was frightening, and as far as anyone knows, the dog was never recovered. Still, all of this gave Mel an idea. Mel devised a new experiment. Until then, he had only used inanimate objects like rocks and ice to test the hole's anomalous properties. What if, instead of lowering just inanimate objects, Mel decided to lower something organic, something living, like a sheep. Well, that's exactly what he did. Mel tied a sheep to a rope and prepared to lower it into the unknown depths of the hole. But if the episode with the dog had already been disturbing, this experiment was about to become pure nightmare fuel. According to Mel, he lowered the sheep without any problems. It struggled and bleated on the way down, but when it reached about 450 meters down, everything stopped. The silence was absolute. The rope remained motionless, as if whatever was attached to it was no longer a living being, but merely dead weight. After a while, Mel pulled the sheep back, and that's when the real horror began. The sheep was dead. Not just dead, she had been cooked by the heat, though the rope was completely intact. But that wasn't even the strangest part. Mel described what happened next in vivid detail during her call into the radio show. The sheep had a visible swelling on its skin. It was a large lump, and, to Mel's horror, it was moving. Startled but curious, Mel cut open the lump with a knife and removed what appeared to be a seal fetus. According to him, the creature had eyes that seemed intelligent. When it looked at Mel, it seemed to understand more than a normal animal. The seal-like creature, however, didn't stick around. Before Mel could capture it, it jumped back into the hole, as if returning to its true home. But like the dog, there were subsequent reports. Shepherds in the area reported seeing the seal creature, and when asked about its appearance, they said it seemed benevolent. This was, by far, the strangest thing that had ever come out of the hole. But here's the most interesting detail. Mel wasn't the first to find this hole, nor the only one to know of its existence. Another part of the mystery involves the native peoples of the region. Red Elk, a Native American shaman, was one of the few people to see Mel's hole with his own eyes. He says his father took him there and told him it was a bottomless hole. Apparently, the natives knew about the hole long before Mel ever set foot on that land, and avoided it as if it were a curse. They believed it was something evil, cursed, and should never be disturbed. And considering the results of Mel's experiments, perhaps they were right. According to the natives' accounts, the hole led to another world, or to a dimension humans were not meant to enter. And this raises the big question: could the anomalous effects around the hole be caused by the fact that it was the entrance to a world with completely different physical laws than ours? The shift in metals, the temperature difference, the ice burning without melting all suggest so. For generations, local residents treated the hole with a mixture of fear and respect. Most avoided going near it, convinced that whatever lay inside was something that should never be disturbed. As a result, the strange opening remained largely unknown outside the area. To most people, it was simply another local oddity, one of many unusual stories passed down over the years. Few paid much attention to it, and no one investigated it with the same determination as Mel. Because of that, the true extent of its mystery remained hidden. The Mel's Hole might have remained nothing more than a forgotten local legend if Mel had never shared his story on the radio. Once his calls reached a national audience, curiosity exploded. Listeners became captivated by his accounts, eagerly following each new detail. But public attention often brings unwanted consequences, and before long, Mel began noticing signs that someone else was paying attention as well. Suspicious vehicles started appearing near his property. Cars with no markings would sit nearby for hours without explanation. Unfamiliar footprints appeared around his land. At first, these incidents seemed isolated, but soon the situation escalated dramatically. One day when Mel returned home, he found the entrance blocked by individuals dressed in bright yellow protective suits. They refused to let him onto his own property. Confused and frustrated, Mel demanded an explanation. The response he received only raised more questions. According to the men, a small aircraft had crashed somewhere on his land while he was away, and the area had been placed under temporary restriction for safety reasons. Yet nothing about the scene supported that story. There were no emergency vehicles, no firefighters, no medical teams, no wreckage being removed, and no injured people receiving treatment. Instead, there were only personnel in protective suits quietly taking notes and surveying the area. When people later searched for records of any aircraft accident in the region, none could be found. No reports matched the official explanation. To Mel, the conclusion seemed obvious. He became convinced that authorities had taken an interest in the hole after his radio appearances and were now attempting to conceal whatever was really happening there. Not long afterward, he claimed to receive an unusual proposal. He was allegedly offered $25,000 per year in exchange for leaving the country and remaining silent. According to Mel, he was warned that refusing the arrangement would make his life extremely difficult. The justification given for the government's actions was equally strange. Officials supposedly claimed that an illegal laboratory had been discovered on his property and suggested there could be serious consequences if he continued speaking publicly. Mel insisted that no such laboratory had ever existed and believed the accusation was merely a convenient excuse designed to damage his credibility. Feeling trapped, he eventually left the United States and relocated to Australia. After that, he vanished from public view. For years, no one knew where he was or whether he would ever speak again. Then, in 2002, Mel unexpectedly resurfaced. Once again, he contacted the same radio program that had first made his story famous. But listeners immediately noticed a difference. The energetic and determined man from earlier broadcasts seemed gone. His voice sounded slower, quieter, and burdened by something difficult to explain. During the interview, Mel described a series of disturbing experiences. He claimed that after eventually returning to the United States, despite being warned not to do so, he found himself struggling with memory loss and confusion. Large portions of his life felt fragmented, as though entire chapters had been erased. He spoke of unexplained scars on his body, including several marks on his arms that appeared surgical in nature. Some of his teeth were missing, and he recalled undergoing medical procedures that he never remembered authorizing. Much of the experience remained vague and fragmented in his mind. According to Mel, whatever had happened to him left lasting effects. He had difficulty concentrating, recalling events, and organizing his thoughts. Memories seemed to disappear without warning, leaving only scattered pieces behind. Despite these challenges, he remained determined to uncover the truth. Eventually, he attempted to return to his property, only to discover that access was no longer possible. The land, he claimed, had been taken over by government authorities and was now under constant security. That radio appearance would become his final public statement. Before ending the interview, however, Mel revealed one last astonishing claim. While researching similar phenomena, he said he had discovered another mysterious hole, this time in Nevada. According to his account, the new site shared many characteristics with the original Mel's hole, but there were notable differences. Surrounding the opening was a metallic structure that appeared to extend deep into the shaft itself, as though it had been deliberately engineered rather than naturally formed. Mel repeated the same experiments he had conducted years earlier. The results, he claimed, were nearly identical. If his observations were accurate, then the phenomenon was not unique. There were at least 2 such holes, separated by hundreds of miles, yet displaying the same impossible characteristics. After that final revelation, Mel disappeared from public view entirely. He never returned to the radio show, never gave another interview, and never publicly expanded on his claims. Over time, his story drifted into the realm of modern folklore, becoming one of the internet's most enduring mysteries. Yet mysteries like this rarely stay buried. Years later, interest in the Mel's Hole experienced a dramatic resurgence as archived recordings of Mel's radio calls began circulating online. New generations discovered the story through discussion forums, video platforms, podcasts, and social media. Some dismissed it as nothing more than an elaborate urban legend. Others remained convinced that there was something deeper behind the tale. As curiosity grew, countless people began searching for evidence. They wanted answers. Was the Mel's Hole real? Could a place like that actually exist? Were the stories exaggerated, or had something extraordinary truly been hidden from public view? Among those determined to investigate was a Reddit user known as Deathwalker33. After extensive research, he claimed to have located the exact coordinates of the mysterious site. According to his findings, a remote patch of land appeared to match the descriptions Mel had provided years earlier. News of the discovery spread rapidly. Interest in visiting the location surged. Online communities began discussing expeditions, investigations, and plans to document the site themselves. For the first time in years, it seemed possible that the mystery might finally be solved. And then, almost as suddenly as the excitement appeared, everything changed. The evidence vanished. The satellite images everyone was obsessed with analyzing were blurred, as is often the case with military bases. Once again, the location was hidden from the public, but that didn't dampen interest. On the contrary, it only grew worse, and soon, a small group of 5 people prepared for the journey, willing to risk everything to uncover the truth. They took cameras and a drone and headed to the coordinates. What they found was far more disturbing than Mel, or anyone, could have imagined. The group arrived at the hole and were surprised to find it there. They were no amateurs. Each member acted rigorously, taking notes, making observations, and documenting everything in detail. As soon as they arrived, they wasted no time in beginning their mission. First, they checked their equipment, making sure everything was in order. Then, they tied the camera to a sturdy rope, capable of withstanding extreme conditions. It was slowly lowered into the well. From the start, the camera captured something strange. The walls of the hole were too smooth to be natural. They looked man-made, as if something gigantic had bored through the ground. After some time, the group noticed another anomaly. There was no sound, only the images illuminated by the camera's own light. No noise came from the bottom or the surface of the hole. Frightened but determined, they pressed on. They continued lowering the chamber further. The deeper it went, the stranger things became. The temperature, for example, behaved unusually. The attached sensor showed that, instead of increasing with depth, as is normal in the Earth's crust, it was decreasing. It was getting colder and colder, to the point where temperatures were exceeding sub-zero. Then the group noticed something strange in the camera feed. A glow, like a flash of light, that appeared and disappeared in a split second. It was deep in the hole. It happened again. And again, the deeper the camera went. The light changed with each appearance, growing more intense, more colorful, more strange. The magnetic field sensor registered strong readings, and the equipment's compass spun out of control. Nothing worked normally. Everything indicated that the very laws of physics surrounding the equipment were being altered. And then, something even more bizarre appeared in the video. A kind of distortion, as if space were being warped. Insistent on uncovering the truth, the group continued recording everything and lowered the camera even further. And this decision would prove costly mentally. When the camera reached about 177 meters deep, the filming stopped. Everything went still. And then it appeared. A strange figure, a thin silhouette that remained motionless, completely still, colorless, faceless, and yet standing, as if watching. And then the signal was completely cut off. The rope fell away, as if the weight attached to it had simply vanished. And sure enough, when they retrieved the rope, only the broken section remained. The group panicked. They didn't want to stay there a second longer. They quickly packed up their equipment and left. All they had as proof was the footage they had recorded. And it was this very video that generated even more controversy. As soon as they returned from the expedition, the group wasted no time in publicizing their findings, along with the terrifying video. The footage was posted on a private website, from where it was quickly copied and spread across the internet. And then strange things started happening. The original video was taken down almost immediately, and re-uploads began to be removed as well. Sometimes the videos disappeared without explanation. Other times, the consequences were much more serious. There were cases of people having their hard drives wiped, accounts banned, and files corrupted. They all had one thing in common. They had uploaded the video. Despite extremely aggressive censorship, the video spread like wildfire. Like a virus, it was copied and republished before being removed. A debate began about what had actually been shown. Theories began to emerge. Some said the hole was a sentient void, reacting against anyone who tried to explore it. Others said it was a portal to another dimension. Many pointed to the effects of temporal distortion, suggesting the hole was a rupture in space-time. One of the boldest theories was that time repeated itself infinitely inside the Mel's hole, creating the anomalous effects. But what about the oddities? The fetal seal, the burned sheep, the dog that came back to life? To many, all this indicated a door to another dimension, something we should never mess with. The government seems to think the same, as the area is reportedly under extreme surveillance. No one is allowed to approach the site, much less lower another camera. While the story of the Mel's hole seems to end here, there is one last piece of information that could change everything. Rumors indicate the existence of a third hole, similar to the one in Nevada and the Mel's hole itself. Some believe it is in Aim, but many think it is in another part of the world. What about you? Do you believe there's a third hole? What exactly was the Mel's hole? Share your theories in the comments below. I'd love to read them all. And while you're here, don't forget to like the video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, and stay curious.